He hasn't heard from you in days, maybe even weeks. At first, he thought you'd cave, that you'd text him, call him, or even just post something that screams, "I still care." But now, there's silence. Nothing. And that silence, it's deafening. For him. You think he doesn't notice? Think again. Right now, he's spiraling through questions he never expected to ask. Why isn't she chasing me anymore? Did she actually move on? Was I just a phase? He's not just missing you. He's missing the feeling of being wanted, admired, needed. Your absence is the loudest presence in his life right now. And it's forcing him to confront a reality he didn't prepare for. You're not waiting anymore. He's starting to see that your silence isn't weakness. It's strength. It's confidence. It's you showing him what life feels like when you stop settling. And now he's stuck in a painful loop. Should I reach out, or did I lose her for good? This is what happens when no contact starts working. This is what's really going through his mind. And by the end of this, you'll never question your silence again. When you stop reaching out, something fascinating happens. You change the emotional rhythm he's been relying on. See, before, he always knew you'd be there, whether it was a late night text, a check-in after a few days of silence, or simply liking his stories. There was this invisible thread that kept him emotionally fed, even if things weren't perfect. That thread made him feel safe in the idea that he could always come back to you, that no matter how distant he became, you were still emotionally available. And now, silence. No calls, no texts, no updates, nothing. And suddenly, that comfort he once felt is replaced by confusion. Why isn't she chasing me anymore? It's not arrogance, it's pattern recognition. He was used to a certain kind of dynamic, one where he felt slightly more in control, one where he didn't have to try too hard because he knew you'd be there. That dynamic was predictable. And let's face it, people take predictable things for granted. But when you break the pattern, you grab his attention without even saying a word. Now he's not wondering what you're doing. He's wondering why you're not doing what you used to. That difference, that quiet absence, carries a message louder than any long emotional conversation ever could. And whether he admits it or not, it stings, because it feels like the energy has shifted in a way that he didn't expect. Suddenly, the chase that he once assumed was over, because he thought he'd already won, is no longer his. It's gone. And now he's left wondering if the game changed or if he was just never the prize to begin with. The beauty of no contact is that it invites him to confront the uncomfortable truth that he might not have been as central to your life as he believed. He starts thinking, wait, was I that easy to get over? Did she even care the way I thought she did? So again, we start thinking, wait, was I that easy to get over? Did she even care the way I thought she did? So it's a cycle of deeper conforming, the uncertainty, the shadow that lingers. It was never there for the taking. It was always there for him to face and then process the grief, the shame, the resentment. And when those questions creep in, they bring with them a quiet storm of insecurity and reflection. Because if you're not chasing him anymore, it means something changed inside of you. It means that you're not sitting around hoping for him to figure it out. You're not playing that emotional ping-pong game where he disappears and you respond. You're no longer feeding that loop. You stepped off the ride. And he feels that. He feels that shift in power. And make no mistake, it is a power shift. Because once he starts to sense that your world no longer revolves around him, the emotional safety net he's been lounging in suddenly disappears. It forces him to look at his actions and your absence in a new light. That silence becomes unsettling especially if he was banking on your presence as a backup, a safety, or an ego boost, that's when the real questions hit him. Did she stop caring, or did she just finally see my inconsistency for what it is? Maybe for the first time, he's forced to look at the value you brought, the laughter, the depth, the effort, and realize it wasn't a guarantee. It was a privilege. And here's the key part. You didn't do this to punish him. You didn't go silent out of spite. You simply stopped giving energy to someone who wasn't reciprocating it. That's not a game. That's self-respect. And that self-respect is magnetic because it shows you're not desperate for validation. You're not waiting on someone else's potential. You're living in reality and walking away from what doesn't meet your standards. That's what he sees now. That you're not just someone who talks about boundaries, but someone who lives them. And in doing that, you challenge the version of himself that thought he could always come back when it was convenient. You make him question if he ever really had you the way he assumed he did. That quiet from you, it plants doubt in his mind, not because you're playing games, but because you're no longer playing his. And maybe now he's realizing that while he was busy measuring your worth in how available you were for him, you were quietly growing into someone who no longer needed him for closure, validation, or clarity. Because here's the thing, when you stop chasing, you stop bleeding energy. And when you stop bleeding energy, you start reclaiming your power. That's the moment he starts noticing the void. That's the moment he starts realizing how much of himself was wrapped up in the idea that you would always be the one waiting. But now you're not. And that silence, that absence, it speaks louder than anything you could have said. When you go no contact, one of the first thoughts that begins to surface in his mind is surprisingly simple, but deeply unsettling to him. Was I just a phase to her? You see, when you were showing up, when you were texting back, when you were making an effort, he was comfortable. Even if he didn't act like he wanted more, he still drew confidence from the fact that you were there. You were emotionally available. You were showing your investment. And whether he acknowledged it or not, that gave him a sense of power, a kind of certainty that allowed him to stay passive. But then you stopped. Now silence has replaced the attention he was used to. And it's not just the silence that unnerves him. It's what that silence represents. To him, it starts to feel like erasure, like you've deleted him from your life without so much as a warning. And that creates a narrative in his head that he didn't expect to be writing. Suddenly, he's not the main character anymore. He's not the one in control. And he starts asking himself questions he thought he'd never need to. Did she even care? Was I just something temporary for her? How could she just move on like that? And here's what's fascinating about that. These are the exact same questions you were probably asking yourself before you decided to go no contact, before you made the hard decision to stop texting him, stop showing up, stop investing. You were sitting with all that doubt, all that confusion, wondering if he ever truly valued you in the first place. But when the roles reverse, when he's left with no more texts to reply to, no more photos to watch, no more signals that you're still emotionally involved, he becomes the one dealing with the emotional uncertainty. And this is important because men often don't process the loss while they still feel they have access to you. They don't grieve something that hasn't actually left their life yet. It's only when they're met with real distance, when they begin to suspect that they're no longer a chapter in your story, that the fear begins to kick in. That fear might not come out as a full-blown panic at first. It could begin with something as subtle as checking your social media, re-watching an old story, replaying old messages, asking mutual friends about you. He won't say it out loud, but emotionally, he's scanning for signs that he still matters. that he still holds some kind of space in your heart. And if he doesn't find them, if you're not giving him anything to work with, it forces him to face a reality that's uncomfortable. You might have actually let go. That realization doesn't just confuse him, it stings his ego. Because now, instead of thinking she's waiting, he starts to wonder if you ever needed him in the way he assumed you did. That's the shift. That's when the power dynamic begins to flip. He was certain of his place in your life until he wasn't. And now he's not sure how to interpret your silence. Was it strength? Was it closure? Did you find someone better? Or did you simply realize that you deserved more? Here's where it gets even more interesting, because even if he wasn't ready for a real commitment when you were in his life, even if he couldn't give you the consistency you needed, he still wanted to believe that he mattered, that he was significant. So when you go no contact and you actually stick to it, you remove that emotional validation he was unconsciously relying on. And what does that leave him with? Insecurity. Now he starts to spiral a bit. If she's not chasing me, does that mean someone else is in her life? Did she even take this seriously? Was I just a passing phase? Someone she was trying out, someone she got bored of? And here's the irony. He starts to feel exactly what you once felt. Dismissed, unimportant, replaceable. But you didn't stop communication to hurt him. You stopped to heal. You stopped because the breadcrumbs weren't enough for you anymore. Because you were finally honoring your self-worth instead of begging to be chosen. He doesn't know that though. All he sees is distance. And in that distance, he creates his own meaning. And oftentimes that meaning is rooted in regret, in curiosity, in anxiety. Because not only is he starting to realize what you gave, he's starting to realize what he didn't give in return. No contact isn't about manipulating someone to chase you. It's about choosing peace over chaos. It's about stepping away from a situation that gave you more confusion than clarity. But the beautiful side effect of that decision is that it forces the other person to sit in the same silence you once sat in and wonder what it meant. Wonder if they were the phase in a life that's now moving beautifully forward without them. And that's when he starts to question everything. He's not just missing you. That's the part we often don't realize when we go no contact. He's missing the way you made him feel about himself. That's the distinction people overlook. Because when you were around, when you texted him, showed up for him, believed in him, supported his goals, made him laugh, held space for him, you were giving him a version of himself that maybe even he liked more. A version that felt admired, desired, seen. You gave him emotional oxygen. And now that oxygen is gone. Men don't always know how to articulate this. They won't say, I miss the way she made me feel like a better man, or I miss how she made me feel safe to be vulnerable. But that's what's stirring underneath when they're lying awake at night, scrolling through your old photos, checking to see if you've watched their stories, wondering who you're with. It's not always about missing your presence. Sometimes it's about missing the reflection of themselves they saw through your eyes. See, we all have a need to feel significant, to feel like we matter to someone. And when you were available, you fulfilled that need without him even asking. Your messages, your attention, your time, it all reinforced the idea that he was important. But when you go no contact, it's like someone turned the volume all the way down. The validation stops. The emotional support vanishes. And what's left is a silence that gets louder every day. Now he's left with just himself. No more dopamine hits from your messages. No more comfort in knowing you'll respond, no matter how late he texts. He has to sit with the consequence of taking you for granted. That discomfort isn't just about losing someone. It's about realizing that without your emotional presence, he doesn't feel the same about himself. And that realization stings far more than he expected. He might try to distract himself, talk to other people, keep his days busy, but nothing will quite replicate what he had with you, because what he had with you wasn't just about fun or chemistry. It was a deeper emotional exchange. You gave him safety. You gave him encouragement. You gave him a place to be soft, even if only for a few moments. And now your silence has made that place feel very far away. He may not tell his friends this. He may act fine on the outside. He may even post like everything's great. But beneath all of that, there's a quiet ache that starts to settle in. An ache that says, I miss who I was when she was in my life. And that's where your power lies. Because the longer you stay silent, not out of pettiness, not out of games, but out of self-respect, the more he has to reckon with the fact that you were someone who brought out the best in him, and he let that go. Not only did he lose you, he lost access to the emotional version of himself that only came alive in your presence. And that is a very specific, very personal kind of loss. Don't underestimate that impact. So while you're over here healing, rebuilding, getting stronger, learning to love yourself more deeply, he's dealing with the reality that the woman who made him feel like a man, the woman who saw the gold in him when he wasn't even sure it was there, has gone quiet. And that silence isn't rejection, it's revelation. It reveals the imbalance, the way he didn't show up fully when you did. And now he's learning what life feels like without your light. And now he's learning what life feels like without your light. Here's the beautiful twist. The more you focus on your peace, your boundaries, your joy, the more he begins to associate your absence with emotional emptiness. That doesn't mean you're responsible for his self-worth, but it does mean you were a mirror, and now that mirror is gone. Now he has to build that version of himself on his own. And so if he's thinking about you right now, and chances are he is, it's not just because you were beautiful or kind or supportive, it's because he felt more alive when you were around. And he doesn't feel that way anymore. And that realization, that's what creates the shift. That's when the silence gets louder than any conversation you ever had. That's when he starts to really miss you, not out of convenience, but out of clarity. He starts to understand you didn't just walk away. You stopped being the person who made him feel whole. He expected you to break, to reach out, to fold under the silence. Because that's what usually happens, right? When someone pulls away, we instinctively want to chase. We want answers, closure, reassurance. But when you didn't, when you stayed quiet, calm, and in your lane, that did something he didn't expect. It challenged his perception of you, and maybe, more importantly, his perception of himself in your life. You see, when someone thinks they've got you figured out, they relax. They assume a level of control. They know you'll text back. They know you'll call if they go quiet long enough. But when you disrupt that pattern and choose silence instead of reaction, it sends a message louder than any words ever could. You're not waiting around anymore. That kind of strength is magnetic. It's not cold. It's not a game. It's grounded. It's you saying, I know who I am, and I don't need to chase someone who isn't showing up for me. And that energy is rare. Most people confuse silence with weakness or passive aggression, but in this context, it's neither. It's presence, it's self-respect, it's emotional maturity. And trust me, he notices. At first, it might confuse him. He might think you're just being dramatic. Maybe he tells himself, she's just doing this to get a reaction. But day by day, as your silence stretches out, as your energy becomes more distant, that little voice inside him gets louder. What if she's really done? What if she's genuinely moved on? What if I underestimated her completely? Now, this isn't about power in the traditional sense. This isn't about revenge or winning. It's not about making him feel bad. It's about showing through your actions that you've shifted from needing his validation to valuing your own peace. That's a radical shift in how you carry yourself. And the moment he senses that, truly senses it, is the moment he starts rethinking everything. Because for him, there was a version of you that always said yes. A version that explained, that pleaded, that stayed a little too long, hoping he'd see your worth. But this version doesn't need to be chosen to feel valuable. You choose yourself, and that is incredibly attractive. And don't be surprised if he starts testing the waters. A like on an old photo, a random story reply, a hey, just checking in message that sounds casual, but is anything but casual. These aren't coincidences. They're little nudges to see if the door's still open. But when you're rooted in self-worth, you don't need to slam the door shut or make a grand declaration. You just stay consistent in your peace. It's in that consistency that he starts realizing the emotional strength you have. And here's what he won't admit. It intimidates him because he knows deep down that the old version of you, the one he could push and pull at his convenience, is gone. And the person you are now, she doesn't tolerate breadcrumbs. She doesn't settle for someone who only shows up when it's convenient. She doesn't break her silence for half-hearted effort. And here's what's even more powerful. You didn't become this version of yourself because of him. You became her in spite of him. In the silence, you chose healing. You chose growth. You didn't just sit there waiting for him to notice you. You noticed yourself. You built your life back, brick by brick. Maybe you reconnected with friends. Maybe you picked up new goals. Maybe you finally felt the emotional freedom to focus on you. Whatever it looked like, he feels the shift. Because it's not just that you stopped contacting him, it's that you stopped needing to. And when a man sees that a woman no longer needs his attention to feel whole, it's a wake-up call. Not because he suddenly realized he lost the best thing in his life, though that might be part of it, but because he realizes he misjudged your strength. He assumed that your love for him made you weak, that it gave him the upper hand. What he didn't realize was that your love was always a gift, not a weakness. And once you took it away, not in anger, but in grace, that's when he started to feel the absence. Not just of your presence, but of the version of himself he liked when he was around you. The version that felt seen, understood, appreciated. That's gone now too. And if he wants that back, he knows he has to come correct. No more half-ordered, no more comfort zone texts, no more ambiguity, because you're not here for crumbs anymore. You're living in your value now. And that's a space he has to rise up to, not pull you back down from. The woman you've become during no contact. She's not bitter. She's not cold. She's just no longer available to someone who couldn't meet her where she is. And that is the moment he finally realizes you were never the weak one. You see, there's a moment that eventually hits him, sometimes weeks later, sometimes even months, when he stops and genuinely asks himself, did I blow my chance with her? That question doesn't come out of nowhere. It's not random. It's the product of your silence, your absence, and most importantly, your strength. When you pull back, when you stop reaching out, when you stop making the effort to bridge the gap, he feels it. And at first, sure, he might enjoy the space. He might even interpret your silence as confirmation that he made the right decision, but that moment doesn't last forever. Because what he thought would be temporary distance becomes a long stretch of quiet. And in that quiet, something shifts. That's when reflection starts to creep in. At first, it's subtle. A song reminds him of you. He passes by a place you went together. He sees something online that he knows you would have sent him. It's these small triggers that start to chip away at the certainty he once had. And suddenly, you're not the one wondering anymore. He is. He starts replaying old conversations, not just the good ones, but the ones where he may have dismissed your feelings, brushed off your needs, or taking you for granted. And it's in those replays that the regret begins to form. Not always as a loud, crashing wave. Sometimes it's just a thought. Quiet but persistent. Maybe I mishandled that. Maybe she wasn't asking for too much. Maybe I didn't show up in the way she deserved. This is what silence does. It gives him the space to hear himself. And more importantly, to hear your silence. Because you're not chasing, you're not begging, you're not trying to convince him of your worth. You've stopped explaining yourself. That alone is one of the most powerful messages you can ever send someone. That you're no longer interested in reminding them how valuable you are. You're too busy living like you already know. And that scares him. Why? Because when someone truly believes they've got time, they don't act. When they think you're still emotionally attached, they take liberties, they delay, they coast. But when your actions start to say, I'm not waiting around anymore, that comfort disappears, that confidence he had, thinking you'd always be there, that starts to evaporate, and he begins to wonder if he just fumbled something rare. Here's what makes that moment even more intense for him. He remembers the version of you that gave so much, that loved deeply, that forgave more times than you should have. That woman, in his mind, was always going to be there. And now, she's not. That loss doesn't always come with a dramatic wake-up call. Sometimes it comes in the middle of the night, in the quiet, when he realizes that all those little things you did, checking in, making him laugh, supporting him when you didn't ask for it, were actually the things he misses the most. Because when you remove those things, he starts to feel the emotional cost of losing you. He wonders, did she meet someone better? Has she finally realized that she deserves more? That question is his fear talking, because deep down, he knows you always did. And if he's honest with himself, he knew it even while he had you. But he thought your love would blind you from seeing it too. And now, your absence proves him wrong. That realization hits hard, and it makes him spiral into the kind of reflection that men don't always talk about. He might not say it to his friends. He might not even text you, but he's thinking it. He's questioning his choices. Because when a woman levels up emotionally, when she finally puts her peace above proving her worth, she becomes unforgettable. And so he's left with that one lingering thought, the one that doesn't go away. Did I blow my chance with her? And the answer? That's no longer his to control. It's yours. Should I reach out, or is it too late? This is the question that starts circling in his mind when no contact has truly set in. In the beginning, he probably thought the silence was temporary. Maybe he assumed you were just trying to get a reaction or teach him a lesson. But when days turn into weeks and there's still nothing, no call, no late night message, not even a social media breadcrumb, something starts to shift inside him. He begins wondering if you've finally detached. And that's where the anxiety begins. Men are often slower to process emotional loss. It's not always immediate. But when there's no new attention feeding his ego, no messages reassuring him that he still holds space in your heart, he starts to feel the sting of distance. He might scroll through old messages or look at photos of you two, trying to make sense of what happened. Not because he doesn't know why the relationship ended, but because he can't believe how firm your silence has been since then. It's not passive aggression. It's not game playing. It's grounded, solid. It tells him she's moved differently this time. Now he's caught in limbo. He wonders, did I wait too long? Have I pushed her too far? Has she met someone else? There's a part of him that wants to test the waters, send a casual hey or comment on your story just to see if the door is still open. But here's where your silence becomes magnetic, because the longer you go without responding, the more he realizes that reaching out means risking rejection. And let me tell you something about the male ego. It doesn't like rejection, especially not from someone it once assumed would always be there. That's the irony. When you were available, he didn't feel the urgency. But now that you're silent, his thoughts are no longer about you chasing him. Now the fear is him chasing you and you not wanting him anymore. He starts replaying everything, conversations you had, things you said that he brushed off, moments he dismissed or minimized. All of those memories start to hit differently, because in the absence of your voice, his internal voice gets louder. And that voice is asking, why hasn't she reached out? He might even try to justify not reaching out himself. Maybe she's angry. Maybe she just needs more time. Maybe she'll break the silence first. But underneath those justifications is a deeper fear. Maybe she doesn't need me anymore. And that is the thought that terrifies him most. Because now, reaching out isn't just about reconnecting. It's about vulnerability. If he texts you now, he knows he's putting himself in a position where he could be ignored. And that kind of silence hurts more than anything. That's why so many men hesitate. They don't want to find out that you've moved on, that your self-respect finally outweighed your emotional attachment. What your silence has done is give you the power of mystery. You've become unpredictable, and unpredictability is attractive. It makes people wonder. It makes them curious. It makes them restless. And that restlessness is what causes him to wrestle with this single tormenting question. Should I reach out, or is it too late? And here's the truth. He doesn't know. That's the consequence of losing someone who was once emotionally open. You were the safe space, the reassurance, the certainty. And when you pulled that energy back, you left him alone with nothing but his own thoughts. No contact puts a man in front of his own emotional mirror. And the longer he looks, the more he realizes that you were the one showing up, while he was taking it for granted. The fear of too late is real, especially when you're no longer broadcasting your heartbreak, when you're not posting quotes about missing someone, or uploading songs that sound like they were meant for him, when your feed is peaceful, when your energy is focused elsewhere. That's when it really starts to eat at him, because now he knows if he reaches out, it's not just about breaking the silence, it's about showing up differently. And he's not even sure he knows how to do that. He's not sure if he can step up in the way you deserved from the beginning. And you're not waiting anymore. You're not hoping for a message. You're not refreshing your notifications. You're rebuilding. You're grounded. You've turned the pain into power, and you're not willing to trade that peace for breadcrumbs. So yes, he's thinking about reaching out, but he's also terrified of what he might find if he does. And that's the cost of losing someone who finally chose themselves.